Hello, welcome to my weekly live stream. My name is Kristine Weber, and I love to help mature yoga teachers shine their wisdom. Um, so, if you're interested in studying with me, you can always check out the Subtle Yoga Resilience Society, which is where I teach every week. Okay, so today I want to talk a little bit about knees, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about my own story about my knees and share with you some tips that can be helpful in yoga because knees are something that certainly are important for our life. Obviously, it's your knee, but also they seem to really get screwed up for a lot of people doing yoga. So, what's the best thing to do for your knee is the question. And there's many different, people have all sorts of different ideas about your knees, but I think one of the basic things that we have to pay attention to is the feet and the position of the feet in different asanas, standing asanas as well as like lots of other asanas, even when you're lying on your back. What's going on with your feet, and that's going to influence your knees. So, my own story is that when I was young, back in the 90s, I went to India. I went to India in 1994, actually, and then I went to Japan in 1991, and I started to get into zazen a little bit there, but then I more got into yoga when I was living in Japan. And so when I went to tea ceremony in Japan, oh my God, you sit on your with your knees folded under you, so they call that Zen style sometimes. A lot of people that practice like Zen Buddhist meditation will sit on their knees. So that what we call in yoga hero's pose, right? So I remember going to tea ceremony and I was sitting, you had to sit like this for hours while while everybody's like mixing up the matcha, you get the little whisk and it's the green tea powder. It's so delicious. And my Japanese boyfriend at the time would go, everybody's just getting high on green tea. Because it does have a little bit of caffeine and then you eat like these delicious sugary snacks. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is that my knees were just like tortured sitting like that because I didn't grow up sitting like that. And whereas in Japan, I was with, a bunch of my Japanese girlfriends when we went to tea ceremony and they were like they grew up sitting like that. So it was no big deal. Then when I went to India, uh, I saw people sitting in unbelievable way, like lots of people sitting in unbelievable ways. People sitting with their legs crossed was just normal. People sitting on their, sitting in a squat is totally normal. So people had so much more strength and ability in their knees than I had learned in my culture. So, and I will never have knees like that. Like, I was already in my mid 20s when I went to Asia. Like like it just that's not how I grew up. So my knees are grew up differently. That doesn't mean I can't have healthy knees though. But what it does mean is that it's okay for Westerners to adapt different. It's okay for anybody, but with knee issues. But Westerners who have not been brought up sitting on their knees or sitting with their legs crossed, like it's perfectly okay for us to have different postures. So when I was, went to India and I stayed in ashrams and I was like taught you have to sit in lotus pose to meditate. I totally understand that because I did it. I forced my body into lotus pose, and the like power of focus in the mind is extraordinary when you can do lotus pose. And then I messed up my meniscus, my left knee. Like I heard it one day, just like, and I was like, oh shit. Sorry. I knew like something was messed up in my knee. I never had to have surgery. I just rehabbed it myself, and now my knees are great. They're totally fine. But I don't force my legs into lotus pose anymore because, yeah, it was really nice to be able to focus and concentrate my mind so much. But I also like walking. I also like being mobile and having knees that function well. So I decided I had to sacrifice that. And I would never tell somebody that you have to do lotus pose unless their body, it was easy for their body to do it. You look at pictures of lotus pose. And when you see somebody who's in foot, you know what I mean, but I'm not going to show it to you, obviously, where your legs are crossed with the feet up, right? So when you see somebody and their knees are on the both knees are on the floor and the soles of their feet are straight up, good. They could sit like that, you know. But most of the pictures you'll see, just like Google image search, right? Most of the pictures you see, one knee is up and the other one's down, and that person is probably heading for some knee problems. What is required is the way that your femur goes into your pelvis has to have so much mobility that there's an extreme external rotation of the femur so that the feet easily sit. And some people have been doing that since they were children. It's no problem. But for folks that started when they were in their mid 20s or later, probably not the best idea. Okay, so that being said, here's one other thing I want to talk about with the knees, and that is that when you are doing a yoga pose, like say warrior two, right, and you're bending that knee that's in front. um, what's important is the way that knee tracks, and you've probably heard this before, that the knee should go over like your second and third toe. So you'll hear that a lot. And that is accurate if you have a flat foot. So if you have if that arch on the inside of your foot is pretty flattened, which it happens for a lot of people, then focusing the knee over those second and third toes is going to be really helpful. The other thing that's going to be helpful is taking the toes of that foot that you're loading into the knee, taking those toes up off the floor. So lift the toes. So in a warrior two, right? Lifting the toes is going to be super helpful for folks who have lost the arch. If you've lost the arch, it's important to keep the toes lifted and glide that knee over the second and third toe. For folks that have a flat foot, for folks that have a high arch, what's actually better is to let the knee track in the direction of the big toe, not the second and third toe. So see if you can keep that in mind when you're practicing or when you're teaching. And that's an easy thing to tell people, right? It's like, okay, you have a high arch. If you don't know if you have a high arch, let me look at your foot. Or ask a doctor, ask a podiatrist or a physical therapist. But if you have a high arch if you have a high arch, then you want the knee to go over the big toe. If you have a flat foot, you've lost your arch, then you want the knee to go over the second and third toe and lift the toes up. That is like a super simple tip that can be really helpful for people in making sure the knees are happy when you're, bending your knees in chair pose, warrior two, and warrior one. It's helpful as well. Any of those standing poses. And then when you're lying down and doing poses like supine pigeon, keeping that foot flexed and even inverted a little bit, which means the little toe side of the foot is lifted more than the big toe side. Sometimes that can be really helpful for people to stabilize the ankle before and use the stability of the muscles in the lower leg to support the knee. That's really important in poses like supine pigeon, which I don't teach to everybody. It's not accessible, but it's much better than regular pigeon where you're jamming all that weight, you're loading the joint, and that can be really dangerous for folks with knee issues or create knee issues, right? So people always say like yoga's so good for your low back or yoga's going to help you with your knees or whatever. Like, let's remember, a lot of yoga will give you back problems. A lot of yoga will give you knee problems. So we have to be very intentional. We have to understand this stuff. Teaching yoga is not, a weekend and you're done endeavor. It's a lifetime of learning. And it's just as valuable as any other profession that we invest time and energy into. So thank you so much for being here. It's nice to see you, and I'll see you next week. Take care. Check out the Resilience Society.